Go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. I'm Erica Sword. I'm the Assistant Vice President for Nationwide Advocacy at the American Lung Association. And it is my honor to welcome all of you today to our call about the Supplemental Oxygen Access Reform, or SOAR Act, which is to ensure that individuals who need supplemental oxygen can get access to the right modality and the right quantity for what they need. This is focused specifically, as we will see, on Medicare. And we are excited to have the end of the call turn into you all immediately picking up the phone and calling your 3 members of Congress to ask them to please co-sponsor the SOAR Act. And you will get all the information you need and more to be able to do that at the end of the call. Next slide, please. A few housekeeping notes for us today. First of all, this call is being recorded and it will be shared at the end with all of you. You will get a copy of both the slides as well as a copy of the meeting under the email address that you registered. And we would welcome you to chat in questions as we go along. As you have a question, and we will do all of this at the and answer all of your questions at the very end of the webinar. In the meantime, I thank my colleagues Jamie over at the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation, who's putting in some of the materials for our call as we go forward. Next slide, please. So this is our agenda today. We're going to do some introductions and talk a little bit about our coalition. And then I'm going to turn it over to different colleagues from our coalition to walk you through a little bit of the background on the supplemental oxygen problem that you all know more about than even we do with the challenges that have been plaguing people who require supplemental oxygen. We're going to talk a little bit about the SOAR Act, talking about making our 3 calls today, any questions, and then it will be time to proverbially flood the Capitol Hill with all of your calls, urging your members to co-sponsor. So our coalition, next slide, please. We are over 30 organizations strong, and we represent a very diverse coalition of patient advocacy, medical, and industry partners that have come together to endorse this legislation, recognizing that the system is broken for everyone, but especially patients, and that given the very different and difficult dynamic that we face on Capitol Hill these days, we are stronger together in terms of moving our legislation across the finish line. So these are the different organizations that have endorsed this legislation, and a number of us will be speaking today. Next slide, please. So as I said, I'm Erica Sword at the American Lung Association, and I'm very excited to welcome my colleagues who will individually introduce themselves as this call goes on, from the American Thoracic Society, the American Association for Respiratory Care, Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation, and then my colleague Lauren Buckley, also from the Lung Association. And but you can see here the broad coalition that we have behind this call, including at the COPD Foundation and the Pulmonary Hypertension Association, as well as so many others. So without further ado, I am going to turn things over to my colleague Gary Ewert from the American Thoracic Society. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Next. So my name is Gary Ewert. I'm staff of the American Thoracic Society. Just as a quick background, the American Thoracic Society, we're doctors who treat lung disease. We're also respiratory therapists and nurses and PhDs who study lung disease. Our interest in this is we want to make sure, as Erica says, patients get the right oxygen system to treat their needs. So why is supplemental oxygen so important? Well, if you're on this call, you probably know the answer already, but just in case, supplemental oxygen is essential treatment for a wide range of lung diseases, including COPD, pulmonary hypertension, pulmonary fibrosis, patients who are awaiting lung transplant, other restrictive lung diseases, LAM, primary celiac, PCD, and sarcoidosis, and patients with other non-respiratory conditions like congestive heart failure. Research has shown repeatedly that appropriate supplemental oxygen can improve symptoms and reduce mortality. Next slide. So we're in a bad situation. So how did it get this bad? Well, several years ago, Congress passed legislation that set a competitive bidding process for all durable medical equipment, including supplemental oxygen. So basically, it led to a race to the bottom for who could provide a service at the lowest cost. And they organized things in buckets. So not only did you have to compete on oxygen, but you'd have to compete on a range of other things in that DME bucket. Sometimes people who had no experience in the supplemental oxygen, but had experience in, say, sleep machines or other devices, were competing for the oxygen market because they had to so they could keep their sleep equipment product line going. And it led to some artificially low bids that essentially decimated both the quality and the availability of a wide range of equipment. Particularly access to high flow equipment and liquid oxygen essentially have become close to non-existent, and in some cases completely non-existent in several areas of the US. It also meant that providers were looking for a way to cut costs any way they could, so they cut back on service, including access to respiratory therapists who would go out and do site visits for patients who are using supplemental oxygen, both to do initial evaluation, to handle exacerbations, to educate people on the correct use of their machines. Bottom line is, because of the race to the bottom in competitive bidding pricing, the whole oxygen system has lost quality and lost access to appropriate equipment and services. Next slide. So how do we get it fixed? Well, right now, people are stuck with the lowest cost or lowest common denominator type of equipment in many cases, and that's either heavy, I'm going to use portable in quotes there, heavy equipment that is technically can be moved from one location to another, but is practically too heavy and too bulky to really allow full ambulation out in the community. Or other patients are stuck on concentrators, stationary concentrators that allow you use in your home, but do not provide oxygen outside of the home or outside of the length of that 30-foot tube that you are connected to. So we're seeing not only a diminution in the quality of care, it's directly impacting patients' lives, their physical well-being and their mental well-being, in that they do not have the ability and freedom the rest of us take for granted to be out in the community with appropriate oxygenation. Next. We're also seeing patients who are trying to get out in the community and are literally starving themselves of oxygen by using systems that are lightweight but might not provide the same oxygen flow that a liquid oxygen system might do, or coming up with sort of in the picture on the right-hand side, inventive ways to carry a lot of oxygen around in a way that is technically portable, but does not have the ease that other oxygen systems like portable oxygen concentrators or liquid oxygen provide. So again, this is a clear example that the quality of life for many Medicare beneficiaries who need supplemental oxygen, for which Medicare covers supplemental oxygen, are not getting access to the correct services. Next. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Miriam O'Day from the American Association for Respiratory Care, who's going to talk about what's next.
Well, thank you so much, Gary, and thank you to the organizers for including me on the call. I'm Miriam O'Day, and I'm Senior Vice President for Government Affairs with the American Association for Respiratory Care. So liquid oxygen access is critical for high needs patients. Patients with advanced COPD, pulmonary fibrosis, alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, and other chronic lung diseases require high flow oxygen. They need this to maintain adequate oxygen saturation, especially during activity. Liquid oxygen is sometimes the only feasible portable solution for these patients, as compressed gas cylinders, which you saw Gary show you in the last slide, are often too heavy, and oxygen concentrators may not meet the flow needs, the flow demands of patients. And oftentimes, patients purchase these systems themselves and they may not purchase enough supplemental batteries to travel with. So the current Medicare reimbursement structure has disincentivized suppliers from offering liquid oxygen due to cost constraints, leading to severe access issues for patients who need it. So the SOAR Act modernizes the benefit and adds additional support. If we could go to the next slide, please. So the Supplemental Oxygen Access Reform SOAR Act, S1406 and HR 2902, is a strong step towards basing the coverage decisions on clinical need, not device category. And it allows for a separate payment for liquid oxygen, acknowledging that there's a higher cost and a greater clinical importance for liquid oxygen. Let's go to the next slide, please. Another component of this legislation that you may want to discuss when you call your member of Congress is access to respiratory therapists. As you heard from Gary, due to competitive bidding, respiratory therapists aren't in the system the way that they should be. They're not employed by durable medical equipment companies the way that they should be, and they're not getting out to see patients. So respiratory therapists, I'd like to point out, are the only allied health professionals specifically trained in oxygen therapy titration, equipment education, and monitoring the outcomes in patients with complex cardiopulmonary conditions. And in the home setting, RTs play a crucial role in educating patients on safe and effective use of oxygen systems. They monitor adherence and therapeutic outcome, and they support the transition of care from hospital to home. Without the respiratory therapist being there, we hear stories about patients getting the equipment delivered out and left on their porch or outside of their garage, and no one shows up and shows them how to set up that equipment and how to use it properly. So an add-on payment to the DME benefit is a strategic complement to supplemental oxygen services that patients receive. So adding a clinical service payment for respiratory therapists' involvement in home oxygen management would, again, improve patient outcomes through professional oversight and education, and possibly reduce hospital readmissions by ensuring proper oxygen use and management of comorbidities that recognize RTs as essential providers in the home oxygen ecosystem. Thank you for including me in the webinar today.
Thanks, Miriam. And Gary, a good overview of oxygen and why it's so important and what needs to be changed. My name is Kate Gates. I am the Chief Operating Officer for the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation. Just 2 seconds on the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation. If you're not familiar, pulmonary fibrosis is a disease that causes scarring in the lungs and makes it progressively harder for oxygen to get into the bloodstream, which is why oxygen is so important to patients with pulmonary fibrosis. So we are really excited that the SOAR Act was reintroduced in this Congress just a couple of weeks ago. There you have the numbers for the SOAR Act. It's S1406 and HR 2902. It is important to make a note of those numbers, look at them. They'll be on the documents that we send to you. You want to make sure that you see those numbers because there are other acts that are called the SOAR Act that are not related to this. The full name is the Supplemental Oxygen Access Reform Act. So you can also reference that, but I think having the bill numbers is really important. Next slide. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the legislation. It was introduced, as I said, a couple of weeks ago in both the Senate and the House. So it's on both sides of Congress, and it's bipartisan legislation, meaning that it has support from both Republicans and Democrats. Breathing and oxygen are not a partisan issue. It's not just one side that needs it. So we are so happy that we have representation from both sides of the aisle who have signed on to co-sponsor this legislation. Our lead co-sponsors are up here on this slide. We've got Senator Bill Cassidy from Louisiana, Senator Mark Warner from Virginia, Senator Amy Klobuchar from Minnesota. And then on the House side, we have Congressman David Valadao from California, Congresswoman Julia Brownley, also from California, Congressman Gabe Evans from Colorado, and then Congressman Adrian Smith, who's from Nebraska. And so we are so grateful to our co-sponsors for introducing this legislation. Next slide. There are 4 pillars that the coalition, those organizations that Erica showed you up at the top, came together and agreed upon were really important if we want to improve the way that patients receive supplemental oxygen. And the very first one is to make sure that supplemental oxygen is patient-centric. Shouldn't be focused on, the providers or the suppliers. It should really be focused on doing what's right for the patient. We need to create a patient's bill of rights to ensure that care is focused on patient needs. And so the SOAR Act does create that bill of rights. It includes things like you get the amount of oxygen that your doctor prescribes, you get the type of system that your doctor prescribes. These are things that are going to be formalized through the SOAR Act. So something that should really improve at the first start, it should improve access to oxygen for patients. Next slide. Another one is access to liquid oxygen. Miriam did a really nice job of describing liquid oxygen, something that's so important for patients for whom it's medically necessary. There are some patients for whom it's not medically necessary or appropriate. A portable oxygen concentrator, if you're on lower flow rates, may be a much better option for you. But as Miriam said, for some patients, liquid oxygen is just about the only form of portable oxygen that will work. So this is a really important part of the SOAR Act. Next slide. Reimbursement for respiratory therapy. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten on calls with patients who had just terrible experiences with starting to use oxygen because they didn't receive the training they need. And it's complicated, it's difficult to figure out. It can be dangerous if you're not, careful, if you don't know what to look out for. So having the training and then also having a respiratory therapist to make sure that you're using it correctly and that you're getting enough oxygen is such a crucial part of the SOAR Act. So this is, again, part of the SOAR Act. We also need established standardized documentation requirements, not quite as exciting, but important both for efficiency and for making sure that there's good communication so that what doctors are prescribing, the supplier is supplying. This one, and then finally, the SOAR Act will also strengthen fraud and abuse protections to ensure program integrity, something really important. Again, we need to make sure that that the patient is prioritized here and that the patient is getting the right service, and that there aren't any bad actors who are able to take advantage of the situation. So this is another important part of the SOAR Act. So finally, I think that Lauren is now going to talk a little bit more about specifically when you call your members of Congress, what are you going to say? But at a very high level, what you're asking for is making sure that the Supplemental Oxygen Access Reform Act, again, S 1406 and HR 2902, and I should clarify, I don't think I said this, S is the number for the Senate bill, HR is the number for the House bill. You want to ask that the SOAR Act becomes law. So I will turn it over to Lauren so that she can give a little bit more information on what exactly those calls will look like.
Thank you so much, Kate. Like Erica mentioned earlier, I am also with the American Lung Association. I'm very grateful to be here with all of my colleagues to inform you about the SOAR Act and what you can do to get it passed. So some of you may have already made calls to your members of Congress, and some of you may not. We want to inform you as much as possible about what that looks like, what you guys can say to your members of Congress, whoever you pick up on the phone, and generally what it will be like to do so. We're having you guys call your 2 senators and your 1 House of Representatives member. When you call their offices, they're not going to pick up the phone, the members themselves. You're not going to get a hold of Amy Klobuchar, as much as I would like to talk to her face to face. You will likely get a staff member at the front desk of some of these offices. Staff members are young, but they are very knowledgeable. Given the increased influx in calls to Capitol Hill, many offices have been getting very overwhelmed with calls, and you might find yourself getting sent to voicemail. In that case, we strongly recommend you leave a voicemail using the script that we will be providing, and I believe is already in the chat. Calling your representatives is very effective. Although they are being flooded right now, they do experience the pressure of flood of calls asking them to do one thing or another. It doesn't get nearly as lost as snail mail does, or social media, or emails. It really puts your voice to your ask. All of your offices will be counting and tallying what calls you guys will be making to their offices and what you will be asking for. That is their job to write that down. And calling them instead of writing a piece of mail or an email, it shows commitment. You know, you're actually picking up the phone and dialing their number and intentionally trying to reach your representatives. So we find this is a more effective way of getting our message across. It doesn't take very much time to call your members of Congress, maybe 2 minutes if you get a hold of somebody. If you do not, maybe 30 seconds of leaving that voicemail. It honestly, all in all, it'll probably take you about 5 minutes to call your 3 members. So I would also recommend, if your members of Congress have already co-sponsored the SOAR Act, if you look up those bill numbers, thank them for it. If you live in Louisiana, Bill Cassidy, our lead co-sponsor, will be your #1 guy. Just give them a thank you, because they've already done what we have asked for. We have 3 key committees. So what these key committees are for with our legislation is they are committees of jurisdiction. Senate Finance is the one Senate committee that will handle the SOAR Act on the Senate side. They mark up the bill, they take a look at it, they're essentially in charge of it. And on the House side, there are 2 committees that are also of jurisdiction for our bill, the SOAR Act, Ways and Means, and Energy and Commerce. If you want to go a step further and look up your House of Representatives member and your senators, if they are on any of these key committees, they could really make a difference with the SOAR Act. Because these key committees have jurisdiction over the SOAR Act, they have a lot of power and say about where this bill will go. So it's particularly important that we get a hold of these members. Obviously, you don't really choose which members you have, but it is good to know when you're making your phone calls. This script should have been sent to you in the chat. Basically, you're going to introduce yourself. You're going to say where you're registered to vote, because they want to know if you're a constituent. You're going to say why you're calling today. Give those bill numbers to them so they can track the SOAR Act and make sure they're getting the right bill that you are urging your members of Congress to co-sponsor. You can briefly explain why it's impactful to you. If you have a personal connection to oxygen, you can say how this will change your life. If you don't, you can say how much it will change other people's lives and how much it would really mean to you to see people live their lives to the fullest and live their lives with freedom, to enjoy going out and going to church and taking walks without any restrictions. At the end of your little blurb here, please make sure to ask them to co-sponsor this legislation. That's very, very critical. That is our ask top priority there. And then you can say thank you and hang up. I will say, if you get a hold of somebody in your members of Congress's offices, they will probably just take notes and say, okay, sounds good. And then that will be the end of the conversation. There won't be any back and forth arguing. You don't need to prepare yourself to defend the SOAR Act by any means. It is just relaying this ask. If you do have a personal connection to oxygen, think about some examples that you wanted to share with the office. How do you personally connect to the SOAR Act, and how will this change your life, right? And what do you want the members of Congress that you're speaking to, or the staff that you're speaking to to remember most about you? Is there something that happened that you weren't able to get access to oxygen for some reason, or you're not able to go out and see your grandchildren because you can't get access to the appropriate amount of oxygen? Those are some great examples that you can bring up to your members of Congress if you do have that personal connection. I do want to mention, if you have a family member who is on oxygen, that is also considered a personal connection to oxygen. And please feel free to share your family members' stories if you are comfortable with that as well. If they have any questions, like I said, that's probably unlikely. Just record them, write them down, and shoot them our way. I can shoot my email in the chat, and then we can follow up with that question and get back to them about any concerns that they may have. We don't have a follow-up form this time, but please do make sure that you have recorded anything that they might have asked. So now we're going to move on to the question section of our presentation, where we're going to open up the floor, go through the Q&A. So please type in the Q&A if you have any questions about what we've just talked about before we send you on your way, of course, to make your calls.
I see one question that wanted us to just explain a little bit more about the competitive bidding program and what happened with that. I think, Gary, you had covered that. Do you mind just, again, explaining? It does seem like competition would be a good thing, right? That's usually a good thing, but what happened so that the system's really not working anymore?
Sure. I think the simplest answer is competition is good. Fair competition is better. Competition that's price only leads to bad outcomes. Competition that is on price and quality can lead to good outcomes. Unfortunately, the way the system was set up, it was essentially who can provide the service regardless of its quality at the lowest cost. And we went to the lowest cost provider, and what was lost was quality. Quality came in several ways. Quality meant you actually had respiratory therapists to provide education to the patients who were using this. Quality meant that you had a good line of products from appropriate high flow modalities for those who needed it, portability for those who needed it, people to respond to emergency situations when needed. Much of that quality essentially got squeezed out because everyone went for the lowest price. Hypothetically, a well-designed Medicare competitive bidding system that includes price and quality could work well. Unfortunately, that was not the system that we got, and our patients are paying the price.
The question is there any formal opposition to this legislation?
I'll go ahead and take this one. No, there is not, and no groups have come out. I think we continue, and I think that really the fact that there is such a wide array of organizations representing the entire respiratory community really speaks to the strong support in general for this legislation. The greatest challenges we have are trying to make sure that we can get to the top of the to-do pile for, especially in the House of Representatives, for the committee, and that ultimately Congress is functioning well enough to be able to address this moving forward. And so having a robust number of co-sponsors, especially in the House right now, will help a great deal with making sure that we can rise to that top of the pile, which is why we're so glad to have so many of you join us today.
Someone said the last time they called, the member asked if there was a cost benefit study. So I guess, can you address maybe sort of that, but also if you do call and there's some sort of question that you don't have the answer for, what would be the next steps? It's sort of a two-part question, I think.
Yeah. Well, I would just say that there's a lot of information that we do have, and some out there that just doesn't exist because of how data are not collected. But we would welcome you to email our organizations and anyone here to just let us know the specific office that had the specific question, and one of us will follow up with them to get that information.
Do we know approximately how many DMEs still provide liquid oxygen? And then I think a related question, is there a plan for oxygen companies to acquire liquid oxygen, sort of to get the infrastructure in place to provide liquid oxygen again once the SOAR Act is passed?
So I'd be happy
can-
to start that answer. You're asking a very thoughtful question. Will the market return to normal if we can get better payment rates? Is a way to rephrase the question. The short answer is we believe so. We've worked closely with our colleagues in industry to talk about what their expectations are. They're looking for some predictability. Quite frankly, the way the bill is written, it sort of locks in payments at the low end. But over time, they're expecting to see appropriate increases in reimbursement that will restore the liquid oxygen market. Does the legislation mandate it? No. Do we believe the legislation has the appropriate economic incentives that it will restore a liquid oxygen market? Yes.
I think the other question was how many DMEs provide liquid right now. I think we don't have any sort of count. I would say it's very, very few. They are few and far between. There are a couple of little pockets, but very few.
I would add to that the Veterans Health Administration continues to provide liquid oxygen for veterans who require it, and they have kept this business sector alive. So we hope that the commercial companies and also the companies that provide Medicare beneficiaries with liquid oxygen will return to this sector and provide liquid oxygen to patients who need it. In the information that the American Association for Respiratory Care put out, we did put a link for you to take action through our action advocacy platform if you'd like to, if you are not calling in today, but we would encourage everyone who's joined us to call in today.
Do we know when they will vote on the SOAR Act, when the SOAR Act will be voted on?
There's a whole process, and the more co-sponsors we have, the more compelling case we have that the SOAR Act needs to be acted on. Thankfully, the House of Representatives still likes to go through regular order for a lot of things, and so we anticipate there being a hearing on the SOAR Act and then a markup in committee in the House before it then moves forward. We don't know if there will be an up or down vote on the House floor or if it will be bundled with another package, but we do know that in order to get the very important hearing and then markup in the committees of jurisdiction in the House, we need to get some good co-sponsors. And so that's where all of you come in today to really urge your members of Congress to co-sponsor this legislation.
A couple more questions, and then we can let people go make their calls. Someone said that their representative was a co-sponsor last time, but isn't this time. Can you remind us what the messaging is if someone was a co-sponsor last time but has not yet signed on?
I would say the message is thank you for your support of the bill last Congress. We are eagerly awaiting your continued support in this Congress, and please co-sponsor the bill this Congress.
Great, thank you. Let me see. Next one. Are there any other offices that people should call? So definitely call your US representatives, US senators, anyone else that people should call about the SOAR Act specifically.
Yes, call other people or email other people or text other people that live in different congressional districts than you are and ask them, especially if they have a personal connection, to also call their members of Congress to ask them to co-sponsor the SOAR Act as well. So the more viral we can go in terms of our requests across the country, the better off we are. And you can certainly call, and the next time you're in to see your provider, see if they've weighed in with their members of Congress, to see if they're, to ask them to co-sponsor the legislation as well. The more the merrier, and when it comes to making calls, but we just need everybody to call their 3 members of Congress, and not above that.
Yes, yes, very important to call those 3 members of Congress. They're the ones who are looking at the bill and going to be able to make something happen on it. So that's definitely that, and then sharing it, as you said, Erica. Could we still call tomorrow if we got to get back to pick up the kids or whatever? Can we still call tomorrow?
You can call every day until your members co-sponsor. Wake up, pick up the phone and call your 3 members of Congress every day, whether it's about the SOAR Act or protecting Medicaid or another important program. But you may call today, tomorrow, or the next day for sure.
So I know we have a couple of other questions on here, but I do want to give people time to actually like make the calls within this hour. Any other main questions or anything else that the panelists want to make sure that people know?
I think we got a couple questions about whether it's better to call the DC office or back home. Members are back in Washington this week. So and you'll get the link to call the Washington office. So go ahead and do that. It's all good.
I see one more question. Are we able to say how much more capacity, how much like more capacity does liquid oxygen have for the same volume versus like a compressed gas tank? Is that something where we have a little bit more information? This person is saying they've gotten some questions on that. Could we maybe share some resources like on liquid oxygen after this for people who are wanting to learn a little bit more about what exactly it looks like?
Yeah, we have some resources and honestly graphics about how big liquid oxygen tanks are compared to compressed gas tanks. And we can add that to the email that goes out along with the recording and the other things that we're going to send you guys.
You can also go to lung.org/oxygen, and it has information about various modalities as well.
Okay, great. And then someone said they can't find the proposed wording in the chat. Can we post it again? We can maybe post it, but I would say we're also going to email it out afterwards, I believe. So we'll be sending that out. And maybe Jamie, you can post the call script again. I think if people join sort of late, then they may not have seen it.
Yeah, let's just post that again since we have to wait for the recording to be ready.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. We need it. We need you all to make your calls now, ideally.
All right. Hopefully we can get that re-upped in the chat. But for now, Jamie, if you could also take this link and just copy paste it in the chat as well, that'd be awesome. We have a QR code that will take you directly to the website that will show you your members of Congress after you put in your zip code. Or if you want to just go right through the operator, call the Capitol switchboard at that number on the screen. They will direct you that way. Or you can go to the link that hopefully will be pasted in the chat to look up your members of Congress. So there's a ton of ways to go find them. Like we mentioned, go ahead and call the DC office and use that script, put in your name and your story and any other details you want to add, and make sure to leave a message if they do not pick up. Also, I will stick around if you guys have any like specific questions. If you're having technical difficulties trying to contact your members of Congress, just let me know. But yeah, thank you all for being here. Thank you so much for being activists and trying to make the world a better place for those who use oxygen. It really has the potential to change lives. So thank you all again, and thank you to my wonderful colleagues for presenting on this call as well. And you will be hearing from us shortly.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.